On February 23, 1965, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr began filming their second movie, Help. The project was initially titled 8 Arms to Hold You, a phrase both innocent and prophetic, which was far better than its working title, Beatles 2. They ultimately chose Help, which turned out to be fitting, as the band was in desperate need of it at the time. The Beatles were aware their popularity was starting to fade. Beatlemania, once a force of nature, had begun to take its toll, and the band found it increasingly difficult to escape the overwhelming bubble of fame that surrounded them. This bubble left them disconnected from the everyday world that had once inspired their music. Lennon was well aware of what he was expressing when he wrote the title track. "I meant it, it's real," he later remarked. "It was just me singing Help, and I meant it." In a 1980 Playboy interview, he also shared that during that period, "I was fat and depressed, and I was crying out for help." McCartney reflected on this sentiment, explaining, he didn't say, "I'm now fat and feeling miserable." He said, "When I was younger, so much younger than today," which was a way of blustering through it. We all felt the same way. Despite the personal undertones, Help remained one of the few Beatles songs Lennon didn't criticize, though he noted, "I don't like the recording that much, the song I like. We did it too fast to try and be commercial." As was the case with A Hard Day's Night in 1964, Help had to be a commercial success. Director Richard Lester returned to helm the project, now with a larger budget, which allowed for color filming. While Lester had a distinct vision for the film, he didn't necessarily share it with the band. "The film was out of our control," Lennon remarked in the 60s. "With A Hard Day's Night, we had a lot of input, and it was semi-realistic. But with Help, Dick Lester didn't tell us what it was all about." The film was a satirical take on the spy thrillers that were dominating the cinema at the time, infused with British post-war humor inspired by Spike Milligan's Goon Show, which had a profound influence on Monty Python. The Beatles shared this irreverent sense of humor, and both Lester and producer George Martin had connections to the Goons. In hindsight, Lennon acknowledged how advanced the film's style was. "I realized looking back how advanced it was," he said in his final large interview with David Sheff. "It was a precursor to the Batman pow wow on TV, that kind of stuff." However, the band's experiences on set weren't as clear-cut. "We hadn't spent a lot of time together between A Hard Day's Night and Help, and partly because we were smoking marijuana for breakfast during that period," Lennon confessed. "Nobody could communicate with us. It was all glazed eyes and giggling all the time, in our own world." Indeed, McCartney admitted in the Beatles anthology interviews that much of the shoot was done through a haze of marijuana. "We showed up a bit stoned, smiled a lot, and hoped we'd get through it. It's okay to get the giggles anywhere else but in films, because the technicians get pissed off with you. They think, they're not very professional. Then you start thinking, this isn't very professional, but we're having a great laugh." Starr also recalled the fun of it all, noting, "A hell of a lot of pot was being smoked while we were making the film. It was great. That helped make it a lot of fun." He humorously added that during one scene where he and McCartney had to run from a bomb in a curling stone, "Paul and I ran about 7 miles, just so we could stop and have a joint before we came back." Filming began with the Beatles characters attempting to escape to the Bahamas to evade the media and fans, unaware they were being targeted by an Indian death cult. Interestingly, the Beatles' manager Brian Epstein chose the Bahamas for its favorable tax laws, allowing the group to gain residency status. Unfortunately, the cold Bahamian winter made shooting the summer scenes challenging. Shooting was set to wrap by April 14, 1965, with appearances from notable British actors like Leo McKern, Roy Kinnear, and Victor Spinetti. Despite initial critical disdain, Lester's innovative approach to framing, filtering, and pacing would later influence music videos and band-oriented films, as well as the Monkees TV show. The original title, 8 Arms to Hold You, was not only a reference to the band's limbs, but also foreshadowed the Eastern deity statue seen in the film. During production, Harrison was introduced to Indian music and instruments for the first time, leading to an exciting new direction for the Beatles' music in the years that followed.